I think you were promised a princess.
What?
Here I come. My hero.
Holy shit, Lois freaking Griffin! Oh, you're so freaking hot.
I had no real intro in mind for this joint. I just wanted to be the first one on this platform to present you with this image.
Bye, Jacob. Good luck. Where the fuck am I?
Animals is an adult animated comedy presented by HBO that premiered in 2016. Predominantly takes place in the city of New York, and it follows various groups of animals just living their lives and going through different challenges. Over the course of its short run of 3 seasons and 30 episodes, it managed to keep its premise fresh, even with a vast ensemble of characters, and continue building on its general premise, until it had real dramatic chops to show off. It's a real outlier in the space that I haven't really seen touched upon in a similar fashion, and to that end, I also haven't really seen anyone talk about this one. I've had it on my radar for a while, but I decided at some point that I did want to cover it, and since it is now the month of October, it's been just over 5 years since Animals has officially ended its run, so I figured it was a good time to finally get it out the way and talk about what made it so interesting. Eat your heart out, housebroken. The idea for the show was kicked off by these 2 guys who worked in marketing. After riffing on a pair of pigeons out in the field, they wanted to try and turn their material into an animated short. After many moons of learning to animate through Final Cut Pro, the duo produced 2 3-minute shorts. After gathering enough funding and a successful festival run, they scaled up to building a 12-minute short. Sometime before this, they caught the attention of the Duplass Brothers, who independently produced the first season for them. Towards the end of that cycle, Sundance ended up screening it, which I imagine also pushed HBO to carry it until that leads us up to now. Things seem to line up pretty well. Everything just fell into place. It wasn't that long ago, but it's hard to imagine a success story like that coming out of this industry in this day and age. One of the first things that you'd notice about Animals is how it sounds.
What are you bringing to the party, by the way?
I found a cracker over there. I thought just something like everyone could kind of share.
Yeah.
It has an awkward, naturalistic vibe that's a consequence of its retro-scripted structure. Retro-scripting is a process of loosely plotting a story to leave room for performers to improvise. It's similar to the process of producing a board-driven show, right? The writers come up with a general story and a loose outline at best, and then leave the board artists to determine how we get from point A to point B. There are several other animated series that share a similar vision, some of which could be seen as spiritual predecessors to Animals. Its basic premise and wider story elements ensures that it builds upon past works rather than aimlessly crib off of them. But on top of that, the show made unique and widespread use of arguably its most crucial element.
Hey, my bosses.
Hey, Tim, how's it going, dude?
Good.
Life and times of Tim fandom, rise up! The amount of guest stars is staggering. It's almost to a distracting degree. During slower moments, I think it's kind of fun to keep track of who's shown up this far and in what form. You just be watching and then Anthony Mackie shows up as a fucking receipt for some reason.
Sorry to interrupt, but I never got my dinner course.
Paper Mike, now's not the time.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all some corny motherfuckers.
All your favorite and least favorite entertainers are here and accounted for. I assume audio editing was doing a lot of heavy lifting too, even if you consider that most of the cast is rounded out by genuinely really talented and smart comedians. They all have different cadences to appeal to. They mold their individual roles pretty quickly, but the amount of comedy gold hidden in shared scenes may vary. You kinda have to be open to this loose-ass genre of cartoon to begin with, though assuming you already are, certain episodes can become a bit hard to follow. The 2 creators responsible are really your main anchor. The duo represent animalistic versions of themselves in literally every episode, with a varying level of importance each time. The rats, being arguably the most notable forms they take on, are consciously made the center point of the long-form narrative. As one of the few animals able to survive major catastrophic events, this choice was perhaps all too fitting. On some level, I could see Mike and Phil's omnipresence as an impediment to one's immersion, but personally it was easy enough to get used to after a couple half hours. In fact, I'd say their involvement was pertinent to establishing the serialized tone that this series quickly takes on. See, each episode of Animals is technically self-contained, but the important details and implications of the ongoing apocalypse are notes you'd only pick up on as a repeat viewer. There's a fair amount of silly, chucklish ha-has going on, but the dour overcast of impending doom doesn't dare abate at any part of the process. It's a unique sensibility that I would say isn't currently served by other adult cartoons. Serious stories interspersed with humor are picking up steam, and comedic stories with serious bookends have been a staple of the medium's sitcoms for decades now. Animals doesn't have much of a real-world bomb to drop, and while the smaller stories they tell are mostly sentimental and kinda superficial, the whole scope of what everyone goes through is rather serious. What you see is what you get, and then some, and then some more, and then we can add on a little more just for fun. Aesthetically, Animals has embraced limited animation as part of its palette. How it moves and how it looks is primarily the consequence of these two guys from advertising creating all of this in Final Cut. They had to lean into the style to keep everything consistent, which is not unpleasant to look at, but for your average, everyday based and Peter-pilled Family Guy watcher, this might be a bit of an adjustment to make. Over time, there's a bit more of a discrepancy in how much, or perhaps how little, should be accounted for in character animation. I noticed that they tend to operate on Garfield rules. Every talking animal is astral projecting their thoughts into the ether, and they can mostly communicate with other creatures and such. They don't have an issue with that. They have facial expressions, but on rare occasions, it might leave their mouth agape if it is a really intense scene or something like that. And over time, they start to break more of these rules, and they get more comfortable with these characters and the style that they've set up. It's really interesting to see them at work. Throughout the series run, there's always been the appropriate amount of consideration given to its pacing and how it ties together its exposition. It gives us just enough time to absorb the gravity of the ensuing chaos without lingering too long. The underscore is also unobtrusive, but not super memorable, which wasn't a dominant factor while taking the performances into consideration. The few musical guests they have on tend to get a small feature, and those tend to steal the show. I was surprised to learn that every episode was written, and a majority were directed entirely by our two co-creators. In Season 1 they had a couple of adult animation veterans co-direct certain episodes, but otherwise, this is a full double solo act. It's definitely more of a rarity within mainstream work. Even a show that seems as DIY as this one has dozens, if not hundreds of folks working on it behind the screen. The nature of Animals, technically starting out as an indie production, really did all the work in lending these two the amount of creative freedom they wanted. I imagine it probably set the tone for HBO as well, who were said to have been mostly hands-off during production, which is cool beans. Animals almost makes the industry look like a meritocracy. Relative to other choices, even on the same channel, its quick succession paints a picture of an all-timer bootstrapping rags-to-riches story. It's not a high-budget pet project helmed by a long-standing auteur, nor is it a roving adaptation with hyper-ambitious goals, or whatever the fuck Tim is supposed to be.
You're unbelievable.
No, when you scat, you could say anything. You could say mickety mick. You could say what? Whoppity woppity spickety spick.
Do.
It has a modest origin story, but it also managed to pull off its high-concept narrative. It's extra, but it's fun. And for most cartoons, that is truly all that matters. My summarizing thought regarding Animals would be that it's weirdly appropriate to the time we're currently experiencing. It doesn't have an overarching message to preach, but its organized chaos does allude to the interconnected nature of our lived experience. Nothing new within even mainstream animation. Within the last half-decade alone, there's quite a few examples of it being explored more eloquently. But it's a little more cathartic to see here. The level to which they popped off here cannot be underappreciated. For a while I've been thinking about the recurrence of sociological themes spurred on by events in world history. mainly how warped our domestic entertainment is going to be as a consequence of our country's insane last decade of chronology. Think about this. Animals was conceived a while before Trump came into power, but its series run ended a little bit after the halfway mark of his run. The former's wild ride, unlike the latter, does have a conclusion of sorts, but the way it ended, paired with the timing of its release, is all too convenient. Like, the meta of it all.
It can be nothing.
It can be nothing.
But it can also be everything.
Wow. So it could be like infinity.
Exactly.
Okay, alright.
After close to a decade, Animals stands out as a top-tier result of the great adult animation experiment. While not quintessential viewing, it is a quick, not necessarily breezy watch that you'd likely be better off seeing for yourself. It's the type of program the masses have been begging to see, but by virtue of capitalist segregation, are increasingly more unlikely to find. I don't even remember when or how I came across it, but it damn sure wasn't something I found while channel surfing. Check it out. Apparently it survived the max purge. It's fully available for you to watch. You won't regret it.
Hello, Rochella. I'm Moby. We are thrilled to be here for this day of peaceful resistance to the powers that divide us. Never forget, we are all animals on HBO. Alrighty, let's...